A very good morning to you. If you're just joining us, welcome. We're in Woodmead, just north of Johannesburg today, and this is the venue for the latest in the series of New Age Business Briefings brought to you by the SABC and sponsored by Transnet. And we're talking about social development. That's the department, but that is the catchment for social security in general. And we're busy unpacking that. Just before the break, we got some introductory remarks from the Minister of Social Development, the Honourable Batabile Dlamini. But we have other panelists, and I'd like to introduce now Brenton van Vrede, who's the Acting DDG for Comprehensive Social Security. And I guess you're in a good position to explain to us what this wide net of social security means, and you're kind of forward-looking. So we have a system in place, we inherited one, we have one in place, and there's always this development of what the future is going to look like to meet the needs of our people. So explain it all to us.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Well, I think maybe the best place to start off with is our Constitution. And as Minister mentioned earlier on, that we have a constitutional obligation in terms of Section 27 to ensure that every citizen in our country has access to Social Security. Now, Social Security is often a difficult thing to define. Once I had to define this to my children, and they basically came up with, is Social Security about all the security guards in the country? And it's not about that, but when you do have an absence of Social Security, you find what Minister talked about earlier on about a lack of social cohesion, and then you need those security guards. So Social Security is a very important element in our society. And as a country, we have been developing it. As you mentioned, we've inherited a system. We've been reforming that system incrementally. And at this moment, we're actually at a point where we've tabled quite a radical reform. This reform is now in the NEDLAC processes. And I want to just speak a little bit briefly about what all that is about. I'm sure we all know about the Taylor Committee of 2002. And they started the process where they came up with a set of recommendations of where they advise government on where we should go with Social Security reforms. And we really, if we look through the processes of history of the last decade or so, we're really now beginning to say, let's adopt some of those recommendations that were put forward. And from that Taylor report, that committee proposed that we should have a three-tier structure to providing Social Security. So Social Security is about mitigating risks that people face through their life cycle, whether it be unemployment, whether it be everyone knows you're going to get old, so one day you need to have a pension, and eventually you're going to die, and you need to be able to your family needs to be able to take care of that. And so they proposed a three-pillar approach. One, what organizations like the ILO is calling a social protection floor, which is a basic minimum level that no one in the country should fall below. And that should cover all risks faced by everyone. So everyone should know they've got that minimum level of protection. Then you're going to get those that are slightly higher income earners, and they might say, well, I don't want a minimum level, I want the income replacement more equivalent to what I'm earning. And so we have that second level where government would also step in and say, we need to provide you some kind of guarantee that should a life risk happen to you, you will be able to have not only the minimum level, but some income replacement close to or linked to your salary. And then there are those that say, but even above that, I want more. And I'm willing to put away more for that. And so that's more of a voluntary space where the private sector would come in, provide a set of well-regulated products where people can securely put money aside to cater for those needs. Now, in South Africa, we identified a number of gaps in our current system. And this is normal in a developing country. Some parts develop faster than other parts, but at some point you've got to pull all of that together and consolidate. So on the social assistance system, for example, one of the gaps that we sort of grew a little bit apart over the past few years is that we've got a well-developed social assistance system which provides income support to a large group of poorer individuals. However, there are gaps in that system in terms of reach, and it isn't necessarily that well aligned. So, for example, if you take the old age grant, income support to the elderly comes through various different forms. The one is the old age grant, the other one is through tax expenditure subsidies, through the Treasury, where they basically incentivize people towards retirement savings. There's rebates. If you're over 65, you pay less tax through or you get a rebate back. And so if you just look at that, if we look at, for example, the means test on the old age grant, and we look at the level at which you can access rebates, there's a gap of about 1 million people or so that falls between that gap, and it's not getting any government support. And so we begin to talk about stuff of, so you saying, I heard your comment earlier about social assistance being, so we have 17 million people on social assistance, and if you look at the current policy of government, we're actually talking about universalization. Saying, let's bring everyone into that fold, and not, otherwise we have these fragmented policy systems that result in gaps in the system. Then the big one is around that second pillar that we spoke about, where government, both in healthcare and in pensions, we don't have that public pension fund which will provide a guaranteed benefit for all citizens in the country. And so the private sector has stepped in, both in healthcare and as well as in pensions. We have a very large private sector in terms of private medical aids, in terms of private pension schemes. The problem, or the challenge with that, not necessarily a problem, is that, first of all, we have a huge number of I'm going to speak specifically of pensions. We have over 2,000 different pension schemes. It becomes very difficult to regulate and to ensure good governance in those schemes. The risk pooling across those schemes are not optimal. Obviously, the bigger your scheme is, the better your risk pooling is, the easier it is for you to reduce costs. So the costs in those schemes are very high. The solidarity is very low, so that basically, at the end of the day, it reduces benefit levels that people are able to get, plus benefit levels aren't guaranteed. So you would be contributing to a pension fund for most of your life, but you wouldn't know what you're going to get. Or if there's a market crash the day before you retire, it could wipe out half of your pension fund.
Right.
So we're looking at transforming the way those funds are run to the way funds are run in many of the developed countries, which have been there for almost a century. They're sustainable, they guarantee benefits, and they protect people a lot more. And then there's a lot of issues around fragmentation. We've got about 5 different social security institutions in labor, in transport, in social development. Treasury also manages as a few. And that causes a bit of fragmentation. So we need to start looking at a more cohesive policy development process to ensure that there's better alignment. So some of the big reforms that we are proposing is the development of a national social security fund, which will provide or step into that gap of not having a public pension. So it's very similar to the GPF for public servants, but just basically a fund for everyone in the country to be part of, and a secure fund that can guarantee benefits to people. On the social assistance side, we're probably going to end up taking 17 million to 53 million because we're looking at universalization of the child support grant, universalization of the older persons grant. And these are just basic minimum benefits that everyone in the country should, and that promotes cohesion. So it's not an us and them, a rich and a poor. It's a child benefit for everyone in the country. We used to have child benefits in our tax system. That was taken out a while later. So it's just bringing the country more together on those issues, and then also just there will still be so one of the fears is that the private sector will shrink because we're stepping into that space, but there will still be room for that. There's, like I said, Pillar 3. But even that area, we do have good regulation at the moment, but even that needs to be further tightened to ensure better market conduct and funds are more secure.
These are private pension funds and so on and so forth?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Okay, there's a lot to explore there, actually. Warwick, earlier on, Minister talked about work streams, and this is kind of your baby. 1 April was a kind of a deadline, a date that was set in the sand, and a lot of people were focused on that date. But you've been working towards the future, and we talk about SASA taking over in the next 12 months or so. What does that mean from where we are? What are you preparing the department for?
Yeah, okay, so the work streams have brought together a lot of professionals, actually from the banking sector, and it's about SASA taking over key roles that have traditionally run by payment service providers and banks. But if one looks at how a bank operates itself, it doesn't outsource, it doesn't insource everything. It strategically co-sources services. And SASA seeks simply to replicate some of those best practices, but at the same time achieving the level of control that it needs to reside over to achieve its mandate. The big challenge is how to stay focused on social assistance, because when you have a banking and service provisioning model that is focused more on commercial services, you start to have some conflicts and challenges. It's a very important role both to the beneficiary and to the fiscus. And so the work streams are taking quite a comprehensive focus to address some of these immediate problems, such as deduction management, and ensuring in the future that abuse cannot happen, that conflicts with the social assistance agenda. And to do that requires a significant amount of controls. And those controls require people and skills. This is quite a complex environment in which the position has been taken that to eat this elephant, you need to cut it up and phase out how you eat this thing. You'll die of indigestion trying to eat the whole elephant. The main focus then of the work streams is to align this best practice thinking and to work very closely, with the key stakeholders in the environment and SASA, operations to ensure that in a transitional way, SASA can take on some of these key functions.
All right.
As I say, deductions being one of those, but there's the issue of risk management, which...
And I'm going to explore all of that very soon after the break, because I'm going to take a quick break now. And when we come back, we'll continue with our panelists and start involving you at home as well.